Hello, assalamu alaikum, students. Can you hear me? Okay, so let's get started. Sorry for not being able to start the class on time. So today we'll continue from where we left yesterday. We were talking about price elasticity of supply. So a quick recap of what we did yesterday and then move forward, right? So far we have talked about that just like price elasticity of demand calculates responsiveness of demand with regards to product price, price elasticity of supply captures responsiveness of supply due to change in price of the good, right? So price elasticity of supply calculates how much responsive will be quantity supplied of a product due to change in its price, right? Okay, now think about this. The way we calculate this is very simple. So you have a formula, which is percentage change in quantity supplied of anything, any product, divided by percentage change in price, right? So this will give you price elasticity of supply. Now you need to know that how do we interpret the value? So by looking at the sign of price elasticity of supply, how can we tell whether it's more elastic or less elastic? So can anyone of you tell me that how by looking at the value of PES, we can tell whether the supply is more elastic or less elastic? Who can help me here, right? So if there is more than proportionate change in supply, so this is something that we've already covered. If there's more than proportionate change in supply compared to change in price, that's known as more elastic. So what I basically mean that if your supply is changing by 10% and your price is changing by only 5%, so 10 is greater than 5, therefore overall it gives you an answer of 2, therefore it's more elastic, right? Similarly, if in the numerator you have value of 8 and in the denominator you have value of 6, so we know that 8 over 6 will give you a number greater than 1. Yes or no? So that will give you overall value greater than 1. So it will give you perhaps 1.333, right? So that's more elastic, right? Why? Because the change in supply, what's in the numerator? Change in supply. Change in supply is more than proportionate to change in price, right? Easy. Okay. Now moving forward from here, we also talked about, right? We also talked about the graphs. So by looking at the graphs, how can we tell whether the supply is more elastic or less elastic, right? So if you have two supply curves, one is like this, right? And let's say the other one is like this, right? Now, just by looking at the steepness, we can tell which of the two is more elastic and which of the two is less elastic, yes or no, right? So out of S1 and S2, which one is more elastic and which one is less elastic? Can you tell me, right? Exactly. So which of the two is more elastic? Yeah. Which of the two is more elastic? So the one that is less steep, S2 is more elastic. Very good. S2 is more elastic, students, because that is less steep. Whichever curve is less steep, that is more elastic, and whichever is steep, as you can see, S1 is more steep, so that would be less elastic. Any confusion so far, right? So we did up till here in yesterday's class. So today we'll move forward from here. So Khizr and Khadija, we were just doing a quick recap of what we did yesterday. Now we're moving forward from there, right? So we just looked at the formula of price elasticity of supply, which is percentage change in quantity supply divided by percentage change in price. We said that PES, or price elasticity of supply, captures responsiveness of quantity supplied due to change in its price. Responsiveness of quantity supplied due to change in its price. If the overall value is greater than 1, that's more elastic. If overall value is less than 1, that is less elastic. Yes or no? Then we looked at two supply curves and we said whichever is steep, the green one is steep, you can see, right? It's steep. So steep curve is less elastic and less steep is more elastic, right? We good? Okay, so I'll quickly show you. We'll talk about what we started off yesterday, factors that affect, just like we discussed factors affecting price elasticity of demand, we'll talk about factors affecting price elasticity of supply. So we'll see what factors affect responsiveness of supply. So whether supply will be more elastic or less elastic, what factors determine this? Factors affecting PES. Factors affecting PES. Any confusion so far? Right? Okay, let's get started. So the first factor that we talked about yesterday, what was that? What is the first factor that we discussed? Right. So if you remember, the first factor that we talked about was nature of good, right? So if any one of you was not here, kindly listen to this carefully. Nature of goods. Students, if I ask you to compare two products, like yesterday we took this example of candy, right? A chocolate, candy, whatever you want to say, versus a car. So if you compare the production of these two products, which of the two do you think will be more complicated and time consuming to produce? Whether a car will be more time consuming process or candy will be more time consuming process. What do you think? Exactly, right? So the answer is pretty obvious, that just by looking at these two names, we can tell that, I mean, you need just few ingredients and it's a simple, relatively simple um, production process of making a chocolate or a candy or a toffee or chewing gum or anything of this sort. If you compare the production of this product with production of cars, you can imagine that, car is a complicated product which has a lot of components, hundreds and thousands of components go into making a car, and that's more time consuming and everything. Now think about this. If the price of candy bar is increasing by 10%, right? So the chocolate price is increasing by 10%. So whatever its initial price was, now it has increased by 10%. And let's assume that the price of cars is also increasing by 10%, right? Just to make comparison easier, right? So candy prices are increasing by 10%, car prices are increasing by 10%. So my question to you is, would there be equal increase? Would there be an equal increase in the output of both the products, or do you think one product output would increase more compared to the other product? What do you think? Would there be equal increase in supply, or which of the two product supply will be less responsive? That's my question, right? That's my question, right? Now, for producers of both the products, now you have to listen to this carefully, students. When there's 10% increase in the price of candy and there's 10% increase in the price of cars, the producers have more incentives to produce because their profits are increasing. But here's the thing, here's the thing, that it will be more time consuming to arrange resources exactly. So just imagine producing more cars is not an easy thing. You might need more machinery, you might need more skilled labor, you might need to get more components imported from another country, and blah, blah, blah. Whereas producing candy might not be that difficult. Why? Because you just need to hire some people. They don't need a lot of skills to produce a chocolate. They just need to mix some ingredients, put the, whatever it is in an oven or cool it or heat it, whatever, right? And package it, and then sell off. So coming back to the idea, even though the incentives were equal for the producers of candy and car producers, but since it's more time consuming and difficult product to produce, so car production will not increase that easily. Car production cannot increase that easily, whereas it's easier to increase the production of candy. That is what we talk about in price elasticity of supply. Now, one thing that I always tell my students to make it easier for them to remember is, so rule of thumb. So there is this thing which I call rule of thumb. So how can you tell whether the supply of a product will be more elastic or less elastic? So the easiest way is to ask yourself this question. If something is relatively easy to produce in terms of time and in terms of resources, then it will be more elastic. I did tell you this, right? So if something is relatively easier to produce, so in this example that we just discussed, we said that smaller thing like candy is much easier to produce. That's why it's more elastic. So if something is easier to produce in terms of time and resources, it will be more elastic, right? And vice versa, will be more elastic. Easy. So if you remember this thing, you should never feel confused, right? Okay, now moving forward from here. What is invisible hand? Yeah, okay. So invisible hand is a word. That's a good question. Okay, so what's your name? Zohan. Zohan, invisible hand is just a term used to refer to market forces. Nothing but this. So Adam Smith, who was one of the founders of economics, He said that prices in market are based on market forces of demand and supply. So whatever we are studying in this chapter, like there's demand for a thing and then there's supply for a thing where the demand and supply are equal. That is the equilibrium point that determine equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So this entire mechanism, price mechanism of, demand and supply of a product, that is what, what's its name? Adam Smith defined as price mechanism. Price mechanism is defined as invisible hand. Does it make sense? Right? So that is basically what invisible hand means, right? So that's what you need to remember, right? Easy. Okay, now this being said, let's continue, right? So the first factor that we discussed is nature of good. If something is easier to produce, that's more elastic. If something is difficult to produce, that's less elastic. Then yesterday, I gave you another example. Another factor that affect price elasticity of supply is availability of resources. Now think about this, students. If you have more resources available to produce a product, I mean, that should be very simple and obvious that if you have more resources to produce a product, don't you think that its supply should be more elastic, right? It should be easier to produce. So if you have more resources available to produce a product, then its supply should be more elastic, right? So I was giving you this example of Pakistan. Think about this. Pakistan is primarily an agricultural country. We have a lot of fertile land. We have a lot of people who are involved with agriculture and all that stuff. So we can much easily produce agricultural products compared to countries like developed countries like Germany, USA, UK, and so on, right? Are you getting me? So if you have more resources available to produce a product, it's known as more elastic. If you have less resources to produce a product, that's less elastic. Confusion? Any confusion, students? Anything that's not clear? So availability of resources. Then moving forward, great, right? Okay. Then you have availability of resources. Think about this. Another thing that always affects your price elasticity of supply is time period, right? So let's write this down like this, and then I'll explain what that means. Time period. Think about this. If you have less time, right, in a short duration, think about this. Your supply will be less elastic or more elastic. So let me give you an example first, and then perhaps you can better understand, right? Think about this. So if I say that we have to increase our production, like let's say Mega Lectures online teaching platform, right? And we want to increase our scale of operation in 2 months versus we want to increase our operation in 1 year. So at one point, we want to increase our operation in 2 months, and in one example or in one scenario, we want to increase our operations in 1 year. My question to you is that in which case would supply be more elastic? In which of the two time periods would it be easier to produce more output, right? Are you getting me? In the longer run, students, think about this. Why? Because reaching more resources is not an easy thing, right? So if we need to expand our operations, we need more teachers. We are on an online platform, so we don't need physical classrooms and all that stuff. But still, we need to hire more teachers. It takes more time. We might need some capital in the sense that now we need to do some marketing expenses. We might need to buy some technology like, laptops and give it to our teachers, or like the writing pad and give it to our teachers and stuff like that, right? So this is obviously time consuming process. So similarly, it's true for every business. Think about it. If there is a restaurant that is really becoming popular, a newly established restaurant, and people really like its food and all that stuff, and they want to open a new branch, right? Now, in the short run, they might not be able to easily increase their output. Why? Think about this. So in the short run, the only option they have is to hire more cooking staff, or to hire more waiters, or to hire more, or to buy more ingredients. But they can't technically, in very short time duration, they can't rent out new premises. They can't what's that called, rent out new premises. They can't buy more ovens, machines, and stuff like that, right? So in the short run, your supply will be less elastic. It will be difficult to increase your output? Yes or no? So in short run, your supply would be less elastic. Students, are you getting? Whereas in long run, after some time period, you will be able to buy more machinery because you might have gathered enough funds. You would be able to find another suitable place where you can open the second branch of the restaurant, and so on and so forth, right? So these are the things that you need to remember. Okay, so in short run, supply is always less elastic, and in long run supply is more elastic because you get time to hire more resources, right? So it's kind of linked to this part, right? So in short run you have lesser time to hire more people, so it's less elastic. In long run you have more time to hire more people, so it's more elastic. Okay, what else? Then comes in another very important point. Now you have to listen to this carefully. Storage, right? um, whether the good is perishable or not, right? um, Durability of a product, you can say, I mean, you can use different words. As long as you're able to explain it clearly, you should be good. Durability of a product, right? So whether you can easily store a product or not, that is another factor that will affect its price elasticity of supply. And think about this: durability or storage ability, right? So if you compare two products, like simply speaking, let's say any food item, right? Any food item that you buy, that could be what what food items do you buy, right? Let's say KNN's, right? KNN's meat, right? KNN's meat, or any food item, compared to something like a shampoo, right? Now, which of the two products is easier to store? Which of the two products is easier? Apple and a car, right? Exactly. Apple, fruits, vegetables, and things like that. Now, students, since no matter what, food items always have limited shelf life. Shelf life, we say, basically, for how long will this product stay good, right? So it has limited or shorter shelf life compared to shampoo, right? So shampoo, if you go and ever notice that the expiry date of that shampoo would be easily 2.5 years from the date of manufacturing, right? So I mean, that's quite of a duration. And for a K&N product, it might be 2 months, 3 months, maximum 4 months, not more than that, right? So its shelf life is less. So anything that you cannot easily store, right? Anything that you cannot easily store, that will be more elastic, less elastic. And who can tell me the reason for that? Anything that you cannot store, would that more elastic, less elastic, and why? Yes. So that would be KNN might experience in few expire in few weeks, and people are concerned about the expiry date, but shampoo won't expire. Right. Shampoo is more elastic and KNN will be less elastic. Okay. Thank you for the explanations, Juan. Okay, now let me explain you this, right? So Zohan has given quite a good explanation. Think about this, students. The idea is fairly simple. If you can store something, then you can produce that in advance and then just, store it. So how should I think about this, right? So if you think of a shampoo, right? So the shampoo companies do not need to wait until there is more demand. They can produce this product a little bit in advance and then sell this product in the market when the demand increases. Now think about this. For some reason, let's say anti-dandruff shampoo demand increases in winters. I'm just making it up. I have no idea whether that happens or not. Anti-dandruff shampoo demands increase in winters, and let's say the demand for coffee also increases in winters, right? Are we getting this? Right? So what the shampoo companies can do, that they can start producing this anti-dandruff shampoo even in summers, right? So they can start producing their product sometime in May or June, right? And by winter and January, they expect to sell that off, right? I mean, they don't need to produce it before just before the winter season. Why? Because it can be stored for a long time period. Shampoo is a product, by the nature, shampoo is a product which can be stored for a longer time period. On the other hand, for a product like on the other hand, for a product like coffee, right, you have to be mindful of the fact that if you produce it very early on, then it might be expired very quickly during the winter season, right? So you might just start producing coffee, like not growing coffee, producing coffee, like in the battered bottled package and so on, right? Just before the winters, because you can't store that. So if now you, given this is true, if you have to increase the production of coffee during winters, don't you think it would be difficult? Because you haven't stored anything in advance. You'll be producing everything there and then. On the other hand, for a shampoo, you have already produced and stored this product, so you can use it later on when you need it. Yes, coffee we can't produce whenever we want. It's a seasonal product, but shampoo can be produced 12 months on the weather conditions. Yeah, and you can't store anything in advance. Are you getting me? So that is what makes it difficult, right? So another example, and perhaps this will make more sense. Think about this. Think of anything like education, or think of anything like healthcare. Think of a service, right? Now, it's not something that we can produce in advance and store it, right? Like obviously it's a service, so you have to produce it as and when demanded. On the other hand, think about clothes. So do you think that all the winter clothes are produced in winters, or the clothes that you buy in winters are produced before winters? Most probably the clothes of winter clothes are produced before winter season. Why? Because you can produce those and store those, and if all of a sudden the demand increases in winters, you can produce more. But I mean, you can store that product in advance so that you have a better idea of how much it's selling, and so on and so forth. Whereas for education and healthcare, right, you haven't produced anything. Now, if all of a sudden before the exam season, there is more demand for our online services, online teaching services, now we will be arranging more teachers there and then. We can't have teachers onboarded beforehand, right? Are you getting me? Similarly, think of a hospital where there is more influx of patients. So what happened in COVID? In COVID, I mean, hospitals across the globe were not used to entertaining that many patients, because obviously there was no pandemic before that. And all of a sudden, when the demand for healthcare services increased because there was pandemic going on, then what happened? I mean, every country started running short of doctors, short of hospitals, short of healthcare services, because there was not anything ready in advance. But for products like clothes or anything else that are manufactured goods, if you anticipate that the demand is about to increase, right? Because that is what happens in winter season. Demand for clothes, winter warm clothes, will increase. So the companies can produce in advance and store that up, so that when this winter season arises and the demand picks up, then they sell it from their stock. They don't have to produce it there and then. How many of you are getting what I'm saying? Education will be more lasting if we compare with healthcare. I mean, yeah, so that we can argue. I mean, I get John. So you are saying education is relatively more elastic than healthcare. Yeah, perhaps. Because, yeah, that's less complicated. I mean, arranging a teacher, right, online education is still less complicated compared to arranging a doctor with experience. And I mean, and you also need, I mean, that depends, right? So physical education might also be difficult to expand, because you need a building, you need all the infrastructure. But online education, yeah, that's much easier compared to healthcare, because in the case of healthcare, you need hospitals, doctor. Yeah, right? Is everyone understanding, right? Is everything clear so far, students? So let's go back and let's see all the factors that we've discussed. So so far we have talked about four factors that affect price slash supply. Nature of the good. If it's relatively easy to produce, it's less elastic. If something is difficult to produce, that's more elastic. Availability of resources. If you have more resources available to produce a product, that is, if you have more resources available to produce a product, that's more elastic. Less resources available, less elastic. Time period. If you have more time period available to produce a product, right, you can more easily arrange more resources and things like that. So it will be more elastic, and vice versa, it will be less elastic, right? Okay, durability, or how easily can a product be stored. If it can be stored easily, then it will be more elastic. Otherwise, it will be less elastic, right? Okay, now one more factor that affect price elasticity of supply is storage excess capacity, right? Storage we have already discussed. excess capacity. So this might be a new word for you, and that's why I'll explain you in detail. So what is capacity? So when we talk about capacity in the, in perspective of a business, capacity is basically what? Capacity is the maximum quantity that a business can produce. The maximum quantity, the maximum quantity that a business can produce. Okay, think about this. So how much, if I have to give you a simple example, so if there's a restaurant that can just accommodate 50 customers per day, ability to produce, yeah, maximum capacity of the ability to produce, very good. So if a restaurant has a size where it has just enough customer, sorry, if it has, if there's a restaurant that has just enough ability to accommodate 50 customers per day, I mean, given the number of staff it has in terms of the cooking staff, in terms of, the people who serve the customers, so it can accommodate 50 customers, let's say. So that 50 customers per day is that restaurant's capacity. That 50 restaurants is that, sorry, that 50 customers is that restaurant's capacity. Students, are you following me? Now, excess capacity means, think about this. So how much is your maximum capacity, right? Or just say capacity. How much maximum can a business produce minus what is the current level of output? At what level of production are you currently operating on? Current level of production is your excess capacity. Now think about this. Out of 50 customers, let's say currently, if a business is um, if a business is accommodating 30 customers per day at the moment, whereas the maximum that it can accommodate is 50, so the 20 which you can accommodate more, the 20 which you can accommodate more is your excess capacity. Right, students? Does it make sense? Is it simple? So if there is a maximum of 50 customers per day, currently you are, currently you have 20 customers per day. So how many can you accommodate more? 30. Now, the more the excess capacity, right, or whatever, yeah. So the more the excess capacity, will it be easier to increase your output or will it be difficult to increase your output? Listen to this again. If you have more excess capacity, would it be easier to increase your output or would it be difficult to increase your output? What do you think? It will be easy, right? Think about this. Let's take another example. So let's say there are two hotels, right? So there's hotel A and there's hotel B, right? Now, if let's assume, so this is hotel A and this is hotel A and hotel B, right? Okay, now let's assume at that, the maximum that you can accommodate. So the number of rooms in hotel A are 1000 and the rooms in hotel B is 500, right? Is it making sense? Okay, now if you just look at the capacity, you can tell that hotel B is half the size of hotel A. Hotel B is half the size of hotel A, right? But the current occupancy, like the room occupancy, right? Room occupancy, how many rooms are occupied, is, let's say, 800 in this case. How many? 800, right? So how much would be the excess capacity of A? If 800 is the room occupancy current level and the capacity is 1000, how much would be your excess capacity? And on the other hand, if for hotel B, the current room occupancy is, let's say, 100, right? So which of the two hotels have more? 10. The class would end at 10, right? Okay, now think about this. So you have ability to accommodate 200 more customers in hotel A, whereas you can accommodate 400 more customers in hotel B. even though hotel B is half the size of A. But think about this, where can you accommodate people more easily, right? Are you getting me? So that is basically what you need to remember. Are we good on this? Right? Okay, now we'll move on. If everything is clear so far, we have talked about what price elasticity of supply is. We have talked about what are the factors that affect price elasticity of supply. We also discussed how to calculate price elasticity of supply. Tomorrow we'll do some couple of examples so you get a better idea of what type of questions are being asked, because these are really important topics, both price elasticity of demand and price elasticity of supply from exam point of view. So it's important that you are absolutely clear on this. Now we are about to move, if these things are absolutely clear, unique cases of price elasticity of supply. So just like we discussed unique cases of price elasticity of demand, we are now about to discuss unique cases of price elasticity of supply. Okay. Now, first question. If you look at a supply curve that looks like this, right? So you always have price on the y-axis. We know this when you're making supply, and you have quantity supplied on the x-axis. Now, if the supply curve looks like this, if the supply curve looks like this, so can any one of you tell me that whether, first of all, tell me if it's even possible to have a supply curve like this? And what is this actually showing you? What is this actually showing you? Yeah. Hmm. It's perfectly, it's perfectly inelastic, right? It's perfectly inelastic. Okay, but what is this showing us in simple words? Zohan, that's correct. Supply means remains same no matter what price is. Exactly, right? So supply is not changing. Supply is staying the same no matter what the price is. Whether the price goes up or whether the price stays the same, your quantity supplied will not change. Now think about this. So this was P1, which was initial price. Let's say the price of per unit of the good was $10, right? Then the price rose to, let's say, something higher than this. P2 was, let's say, $12 or anything, right? And so on. But you can see, even when the price is increasing, producers are not producing more. So there has to be a reason for it. Now let's take some real life example. Now, if you imagine of a concert, right, in a closed environment, right? So if there's a concert taking place in a university hall, I mean, there are always limited seats. Or if there is a conference, if there is some meeting or some seminar or some webinar or whatever is going on in any closed premises where there are limited seats, 100, 200, because auditorium obviously has limited seats. I mean, people can't be lying down on the floor. Sometimes they do. So you can't increase the capacity of that thing. Similarly, think about this. If you think of a stadium, so when, let's say, there is World Cup going on, or let's say there's a really popular match and people are really dying to buy tickets for that match, even if the prices, everyone wants to go and watch the match and the prices are just going up and up and up because demand is increasing, you can't increase supply. Because if there are 1 lakh people that can be accommodated, 1 lakh is the capacity of that stadium, then 1 lakh is the maximum that the stadium can hold, nothing more, nothing less, right? Nothing more, especially, right? Easy. Are we getting this? So when you have supply that doesn't change no matter what the price is, and that could be in such cases. Similarly, think of a parking space. If even if you are willing to pay like double the price, so otherwise, let's say parking for 1 hour is $10 in that space, but you are willing to pay, let's say, $20 for the parking. But if there is no space, right, what would you do? Right, there is no space. The person, even that person who owns the parking space, would want to give you that space because you're paying double. But he can't really do that because there's limited space. The space can't be increased even if people start paying him more, right? So for products which have, this is basically, as Zohan said, this is known as we also saw in the case of demand, it's known as perfectly inelastic supply. So supply doesn't change no matter what. Inelastic supply. Students, are you following? Perfectly inelastic supply, inelastic. And what will be the value of this? If supply doesn't change and price is changing, if supply doesn't change, if in the numerator you always have a zero, if in the numerator you always have a zero, in the numerator you always have a zero, and if there is any value in the denominator, right? 0 divided by 5 is 0 divided by 5 is 0. Yes or no? 0 divided by 5 is 0, right? Okay. Now, right? So perfectly inelastic supply will always have a value of 0. Okay. Now, another unique case of PES, right? Another unique case of PES, right? Looks like this. So think about this. So if the supply curve for a product looks like this, what does this show? Right? So you have price on the y-axis, you have quantity supplied on the x-axis. So what is this showing us? What is this showing us, right? That price is not changing, but you can produce as much quantity as much you want to. So price will stay fixed, but you can produce as much quantity at this price as much you want to, right? So can you imagine any product for which the price stays fixed, but at that price you can produce as much quantity as much you want to? What could be an example of this? Yeah, this is perfectly elastic. Exactly. So we call this perfectly elastic supply, but let's take a real life example. Now, students, think about this. This might be a little tricky. Zohan, yeah, to some extent. But a better way to explain this, students, think about this. So yesterday I told you that there is this something known as perfect competition. So there is this market where there are a lot of producers that are selling similar type of products, and the prices are fixed because no single producer can charge a price different from what other producers are charging, right? Because there's so much supply, right? So the idea is that the prices in that market is fixed. Oftentimes prices are also sometimes fixed by the government and stuff like that, but at that price, one single producer can produce whatever amount it wants to. So let's say currently if 1 kg of wheat is selling for 100 rupees in Pakistan. So 1 kg of wheat is selling for 100 rupees in Pakistan, right? Now there's so many farmers in Pakistan, like literally hundreds and thousands of farmers that produce wheat, right? So one single farmer can produce whatever quantity it wants to, but its supply will have negligible effect on the price. Think about this. If one farmer increases or even double its output in Pakistan, do you think that that person is supplying enough to make an impact on the market prices? Right? So is that person producing enough to make an impact on the market pricing? Right? No, that person might be producing 0.001 or 0.1% of the total market output, right? So long story short, what happened that the price of wheat in Pakistan, it's a big market, will still stay the same, but that farmer is free to produce whatever quantity it wishes to produce. It can produce more quantity, so price would not change, price would stay fixed, but your output is increasing. So the perfectly elastic demand was also showing something similar idea, that there is so much competition that for one consumer, right, that for one consumer, the prices are fixed and whatever quantity it wants to buy, it can buy, right? So we'll study more about this. We'll study more about this. What's that called? Perfect competition when we move to A2, right? But for now, what you need to remember is that it's a market structure where there's a lot of competition with a lot of suppliers and a lot of consumers. So no single consumer demand would affect the market price. So I can buy 100 units, 200 units, 300 units. My demand would not affect the market overall. And similarly, there are so many producers in the market that no single producer can affect the supply. Supply would also stay the same. Right? Are you getting me? Okay. Now, very last case that we'll talk about tomorrow, right, is unitary elastic. So just like in the case of unitary elastic demand, the value is -1. Here, the unitary elastic supply will have a value of +1, right? Which means that for 5% change in price, there will be 5% change in supply. right? Similarly, for 6% change in price, there will be 6% change in supply and vice versa, because the change in supply is proportionate to the change in price. Whatever is